rather than what the Chancellor would like them to be, buried in his bunker at number 11. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow the honourable gentleman whose robust arguments I always enjoy, if not agree with. The purpose of this bill, and it's a pleasure to speak in the second reading of it, is to separate politics and economics. I feel not always an easy job, but one that's important to do. There's a body of academic understanding about the importance of independence, of judgments, of forecasting, of transparency, and I think the importance of that is felt and understood across both sides of the House. So in many ways this bill makes clear Labour's economic legacy of the past decade. I'm waiting for the intervention, but none comes. Which is rules-based economic policy. The Sustainable Investment Rule and Golden Rule have already been mentioned, and the reasons for those rules were clear. After decades of boom and bust, it was felt that a way forward was to establish clear lines of accountability and clear rules by which economic policy might be set. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Lady for giving way. As much as I agree with her comments that a golden rule was important and brought in, how does she respond to the fact that the dates of those golden rules were moved to fit the fiscal cycle at the time, to fit in with what the Chancellor was trying to say, rather than just sticking to the timeline he originally outlined for that cycle to take place?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Understanding the business cycle has been the business of economists since the dismal science began. That it's a difficult thing to do doesn't make it the wrong thing to try and do, and I applaud some of the work that's been done by the Treasury and by others in trying to find a better way forward. That's how I would respond to that point. It's an important question, and I think one that can't be dismissed as, oh, this is people politicking. Actually, understanding the business cycle is an extremely difficult thing to do. So, as I was saying, when we consider the importance of rules-based economic policy, I think it's important to reflect, as has already been discussed in this debate, that the Office of Budget Responsibility is to fiscal policy what independence of the Bank of England was and remains to be to monetary policy. That is an external to the Treasury body that's charged with an important economic function that will drive the policy prescriptions that the government make in liaison with, in discussion with, and working alongside the independent chairs and officials from those organisations. An extremely difficult job, I have no doubt. But I wonder how real this independence can be, and I think that will be an important question for us to consider as we do consider this bill going forward in this House. I think that, in fact, the OBR's work will be inextricably linked with government departments, and this point was brought home to me in a parliamentary question that I asked seeking forecasts from the Department of Work and Pensions of the number of young people that would be unemployed as we go forward through the life of this Parliament. And if I might read from the Minister of State in the Department for Work and Pensions response to me, he said the department produces projections for business planning purposes which are aligned to overall independent claimant count forecast published by the Office of Budget Responsibility. So in thinking about the answer to this question, I wondered what the nature of this alignment could be, and I understand that this will be an iterative process going forward as business planning projections are made and are discussed in challenge conversations with the OBR. So I think it won't be an easy task to maintain the independence of this body, but it must be one that we should all strive to do. And Mr Deputy Speaker, if you'll allow me, I must just mention that I mentioned this parliamentary question in Treasury questions last Thursday and said that The government's own business planning projections show that the proportion of young people on the dole by the end of this Parliament will be reduced by less than 1%. In fact, I misspoke and it should have been less than 1 percentage point. So I just take this opportunity to put that on the record. So, as I was saying, it will be a difficult job behind the scenes to maintain the independence, and Lars Calmfors, who's already been mentioned, has argued that it will be difficult to stop or prevent behind-the-scenes negotiations with Treasury. But I believe that the government have set such store by the independence of the OBR that they do want this to succeed, and they do want this independence to be maintained. And I think has already been mentioned by other members, a suggestion that we perhaps could make is increased accountability to Parliament via the Treasury Select Committee. And I'm sure that the members of that committee will be perspicuous in demanding that accountability and that independence. To conclude, I just want to make a few further remarks about rules-based economic policy, which I think I take from this debate that it's agreed across the House that the right way to make economic policy is to set out ahead of events what the principles, what the rules are that the government wishes to stick to, and then allow itself to be held up and to be judged on the basis of those rules. So what could possibly be the problem with this approach to making economic policy? Well, in some ways, Mr Deputy Speaker, we are already seeing it. Young people and unemployed, because of the global shock, face significant difficulties in this country, and we have to ask ourselves how well do the rules that we set up our economic policy on the basis of allow us to act to ensure that our economy runs well? Because surely economic measures are the tools to aid a well-functioning society and not the other way round. If so, our economic policy must be able to respond to shocks. So I would say to the Minister, not only must he say, must the government say what their rules are for their economic policy, and must they allow themselves, as they are doing, to be judged by independent bodies on those rules, but also they need to say how they will respond to crises. Should we as a country find ourselves in a further global economic downturn and an even worse situation for residents of this country, for especially those on the lowest incomes or at the start of their careers facing severe unemployment, how will the government use flexibility of its economic policy to try and return the country to growth, and how will its economic rules take account of the possibility of shocks? This, I think, Mr Deputy Speaker, is a significant challenge for the government, and one that I hope all in this House will add to the scrutiny of as we move forward with this bill.
David Ruttley.